Muhammad Ali is the latest work from the acclaimed filmmaker Ken Burns and his team at Florentine Films. It will premiere on PBS on September 19th. Ken Burns is with us today to talk about the film. Ken, great to see you again. Tell us, why Muhammad Ali? What led you to profile him?
It's always good to see you. This is one of the great characters, one of the great stories that we've ever come across. My daughter, Sarah Burns, and her husband, David McMahon, longtime collaborators with me on Jackie Robinson and on the Central Park Five and many other films. We've just been drawn to him for years. They're the writers in addition to the co-directors. This is the great sports figure of the 20th century and one of the most important figures, period, of the last half of the 20th century. And his life is an intersection of all of the things, all of the themes we're talking about now. And so I think there's something really relevant. And there's so many films on Muhammad Ali, which we love, specific fights, a couple of years, but this is all soup to nuts, from Boyhood in Louisville, Kentucky, in Jim Crow America, to Death by Parkinson's, just a few years ago, and all in between. And we're focused on a lot of the fights, but also his faith, his conversion to Islam, his joining of a sect called the Nation of Islam, his fight with the United States government, his personal life, the many wives he had, the children. They're all represented here. And this is, in every regard, a kind of hero's journey. We just are so drawn to him. I don't think I've ever, in all the biographies I've done, I don't think I've ever come across a character that was so powerful and moved me so emotionally as Muhammad Ali.
I don't think it's hyperbole to say that Muhammad Ali was one of the most consequential people of the last half of the 20th century, certainly one of the most controversial.
Yeah, and I think it's both of those things. He's consequential because he engages in so many ways. He's obviously, and was voted that, the sportsman of the 20th century by Time and Newsweek and Sports Illustrated, things like that. And he is that, a three-time champion, came back, won it, and claimed his title for 3 times. It's just a remarkable story. And of course, was joining a separatist religious sect, the Nation of Islam, refused induction into the draft, had his license suspended, then convicted of essentially draft dodging, and sentenced to 5 years in prison, $10,000 fine. He appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. He's a different kind of African American at a time when the civil rights movement is sort of preaching integration. He's loud and braggadocio and preaching separation. There's all sorts of controversy. And yet, at the end of his life, Steve, he ends up the most, and for several of the last decades of his life, he ends up the most beloved person on the planet. The last biography I did, significant one, was on Ernest Hemingway, who, like Ali, had 4 wives, and his life ended tragically. This is a life that is also beset by a terrible disease that sort of encases him. And yet, at the same time, it's this extraordinary arc, and there was not a continent where people did not adore him. And even Americans, some Americans who had grown to dislike him for his brashness, for his bragging, for whatever it might be, and then obviously for his political and religious stances, came around to sort of respecting him. And as America realized Vietnam had been a mistake, they began to forgive him as he lost fights and then worked to come back and reclaim the heavyweight championship. It's one of the great stories of all time.
Was Ali the first athlete to really tackle race as a social issue? You also profiled Jackie Robinson. He was thrust into that position as the first African-American major leaguer, but Ali really embraced it.
Yes.
Was he the first to do that? And then did he open the doors for others, John Carlos and Tommy Smith in the '68 Olympics and others?
I think that's a very smart question. I think they're all part and parcel, different generations. We interviewed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he talks about how his hero growing up had been Jackie Robinson. And then the scholar Gerald Early points out that he had adored Robinson, but then it was Ali in a new generation that was a new definition of black manhood. And of course, Carlos and Smith are going to be part of that at the '68 Mexico City Olympics. I made a film about Jack Johnson, the first African-American heavyweight champion, who won his title in 1906, I believe, first time, and then defended it against all the white hopes. And so while he wasn't interested in talking about race or being a leader in that regard, he was, of course, bringing the question to the fore, as did Jackie. And Jackie knew what he was carrying and the burden he had. And if you look at Jackie, the oldest picture you can think of him, it looks like he's an 85-year-old man. He's 53 when he dies, of all the burdens he carries. So Jackie was entirely conscious of the work he had to do. And then here's Muhammad Ali, kind of cut from a different mold, brash and confident and different from the fighters that we'd seen before. He was not Sonny Liston in any way, shape, or form. And so he struts across his stage and begins to animate a new generation of African Americans, some of them impatient with the slow progress of this nonviolent civil rights movement, some of them opposed to Vietnam, not wanting their kids to be the cannon fodder that African Americans were early on in the war. All of these different things, he's an intersection of it. And as we begin to, in a post-Vietnam era, kind of blossom into a media culture in which celebrity it becomes everything, he becomes, in a way, bigger than life itself. And then, the tragedy is, of course, absorbing all of those millions of blows is going to provoke this terribly restricting disease. It's going to silence a loud and brash man. And yet in that journey, he finds a kind of inner peace and begins to sort of atone for all the things he's done. I can't begin to tell you, it's so exciting to have worked on this. And I think that Sarah Burns and David McMahon would say the same thing. There's something very powerful. You can see it in his daughter Rashida, who's there, who seems to have a little bit of the spirit of Muhammad Ali in him. We can't wait to share it with you all starting in September.
One of the advantages, I think, to focusing on a person like Ali, who's a modern figure, is that so many people who knew Ali are still around. It's not like somebody who died generations ago. So you had a long list of people who you could talk to who don't just know about Ali anecdotally, they knew Ali.
That's right. There are some historians and people who've done really great work, like Randy Roberts and particularly Jonathan Eig in biographies, and Gerald Early, as I mentioned before, Sherman Jackson, who's a scholar of Islamic, Todd Boyd, who's a media studies professor. All of these people may have met him once or twice, and he influenced them in so many ways. But we have family members. We have Larry Holmes. We have other boxers. We have people that were in his corner, literally and figuratively, and know him and can help bring him to life. 2 wives, 2 daughters, it's his brother, it's neighbors in Louisville who remember him. It's really, I think, as complete a portrait as you can get. And I'm really excited. And of course, leading up to it, we're having all these conversations about it. And Wednesday night, the 23rd of June, we're going to have, with Jesse Washington moderating, with the undefeated, his daughter Rashida Ali, and of course, the great sports writer and just writer, period, Howard Bryant, and me. We're going to talk a little bit about Ali the man. We have many other conversations in which we're going to talk about, Ali on the world stage, and Ali and race and religion, and Ali and activism, and the modern athlete, some of the same themes we're talking about here. So these kind of conversations, everybody should go on. If you go to pbs.org/all events, you can register, obviously completely free. We'd love to have you join in the conversation we have this Wednesday night, the 23rd of June, and then subsequent ones are coming up throughout July and August and September, leading up to our broadcast. So join us for these conversations. This is somebody that may seem now a little bit in the, the distant or the medium past, who is speaking to this moment in every way, shape, or form. You take an idea that's happening right now. He's about freedom. He is about the American dream of freedom.
Ken, one of the questions I always like to ask you when we talk about your projects is there anything about Muhammad Ali that you had no idea about that you learned of while making this film that was really a light bulb going off moment for you?
Well, I everything, you go in and you say, "Oh, I grew up with him. My dad and I used to watch the '60 Olympics together when I was a little boy, and we watched him and prepare for the Sonny Liston fight. And oh, I remember this. And oh, we were opposed to the Vietnam War, and so was he. So he became a hero at a time when he was definitely hated by so many." Every day was just a revelation. It's going into a subject deeply and obliterating all the conventional wisdom, all the sort of superficial understanding you have of him. It was beautiful, and it might have to do with his relationship with his wives and his children. It might have to do with some of the hangers on. It may have to do with just the beauty, the choreography, the ballet of boxing. It's brutal for many people, and we understand that. And so we have a boxer, Michael Bent, who is just an amazing interpreter, kind of like a Greek chorus in the middle of most of the important fights, telling us what's going on and getting us to understand, oh, he's not doing well in this fight. If he's going back, this is what this means. Or conversely, this was his masterpiece. This was his Picasso. This was his Baryshnikov. And you begin to appreciate boxing, called the sweet science, which for most of us, there's very little sweet about it. So I learned about boxing. I learned about the age. I learned about the man. I learned about the family man. I learned about the politics. I understood a little bit more, or a lot more, about the Nation of Islam and that complicated sect, the division it had with one of their own members, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali's relationship with Malcolm X, and then him choosing to stay with Elijah Muhammad, the head of the, complicated and not perfect kind of American hybrid. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said, this is not Islam. This is kind of an American version of it, and it doesn't. And Malcolm X begins to move more towards real Islam, as does Muhammad Ali in the course of his life. So I think it will provoke and challenge everybody, particularly those who think they know, because there is so much more to find out. And so it's never just that one thing. It's just a celebration of a kind of avalanche, a tsunami of new information that's just head shaking. And, people always say that about our films. I thought I know, but I had no idea. And I tell them, yeah, that's our situation too. It's just, we shake our heads with the wonder, the complexity, the darkness of it at times. He is not always, he treats Joe Frazier, his main rival, using the Jim Crow language of the Louisville in which he grew up. It does not redound to his benefit, and yet somehow he begins to transcend it. He tries to forgive Frazier. All of these things are interesting. But if you want to put into context the first Frazier fight, the second Frazier fight, the Rumble in the Jungle, the Thrilla in Manila, the third Frazier fight, all of these things are there, and lots of others, both Liston fights, the Olympic fights, the young amateur stuff. We've found new rare footage that has never been seen before, and photographs. We're really excited to share that with everyone.
All right. And Ken, finally, before we let you go, it seems like it was just a few months ago we were talking about your last project about Ernest Hemingway. Here we are talking about Muhammad Ali. The film premieres in September. You're as busy as you've ever been in your career. What else is in the pipeline?
Well, we're finishing a film on Benjamin Franklin, born the same day as Muhammad Ali, very interestingly enough, January 17th, not the same century or the same year. We're doing one on the United States and the Holocaust. We're doing a biography of the buffalo. It's really a parable of de-extinction. We're doing a big, massive history of the Revolution, the American Revolution. We're doing a film on called Emancipation to Exodus, about African American life from the January 1st 63 when the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect to the beginning of the Great Migration. We're doing LBJ and the Great Society, and our first non-American topic on Leonardo da Vinci. All of them are underway. I've got 4 different teams, and I just flit like a butterfly from one to the other. And still, I'm just, the older I get, the greedier I get for doing this, because if I were given 1,000 years to live, I wouldn't run out of topics in American history.
All right, Ken Burns, Muhammad Ali, the latest film from Ken and his team at Florentine Films, will premiere on PBS on September 19th. Ken, always a great pleasure to talk with you, and we look forward to speaking with you again when the next project comes out.
Thank you, Steve, so much. I really, really appreciate it.